Thank you very much for joining the ZONEMIX webinar. I'm Ewan Brown, the General Manager for Australian Monitor, and I'm joined by Peter Cleary, the Brand Manager.
That's me. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on your location. Okay,
so jumping straight into it, what is the ZONEMIX solution? The ZONEMIX is a multi-zone audio mixer product. It also contains software inside it that has a task management feature and a scheduler feature, and also is a paging solution. So it can form any one of these single tasks or a combination of all of them to provide a really flexible solution for multiple end applications. It also comes with option wall accessories, paging stations, and has the PC control software that accompanies the system. So the system includes a ZONEMIX 4 and a ZONEMIX 8. As the name implies, the ZONEMIX 4 is a 4-zone system and the ZONEMIX 8 is an 8-zone system. In addition to the core ZONEMIX product, we have control panels, which is a WP4R, WP10 and a WP Vol. These are three options that, depending on your end use case, you would select which appropriate control panel. So for example, if you just wanted volume control only, you would use a WP Vol. If you wanted to start having additional button abilities to select sources, etc., you would then pick one of the other control panels. In addition to the control panels, there are also audio wall panels, and as we'll explain later, the ZONEMIX has the capability of taking remote audio inputs into the system, so you can connect things like our Bluetooth wall panel, which is a WP-BT, or the WP-ML, and those can feed back into the system as remote inputs into the ZONEMIX. We then have the control software, which we'll go through later, and the ZMPS, which stands for the ZONEMIX Paging Station. So jumping straight into the features of the main panel of the ZONEMIX, on the left side we have our status indication of signal present. So when commissioning is happening or audio isn't coming out, you have the indication there. The SD card slot, there is not an SD card that comes with the product. That's an optional extra. If you want to customize audio that's being played out of the system, you can put that audio onto the SD card and then play the messages from that source. The main controls on the front are the 4 rotary encoder knobs that allows you to do various output and input routing selection, and menus to do various setup features on the front panel. On the right hand side, you then have a USB-C connector, and that is the easiest way to connect the system to the PC control software, but the PC control software also allows connection through Ethernet as well. But for very easy commissioning, you can use the USB-C on the front and directly connect your laptop into the ZONEMIX. And then to the main core of the ZONEMIX product, we have, I'm bringing my cursor in here, we have 6 audio inputs. These are shared to the 4 audio outputs or 8 audio outputs. So for a ZONEMIX 4, we have 4 stereo outputs. That would be left and right, left and right, left and right, left and right for the 4 audio outputs. And then for the ZONEMIX 8, they're mono only. So you would then have a mono 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in terms of the audio output here. So we have 6 shared inputs to the 4 or 8 outputs, and that's the core of the audio matrixing of the product. And then we have accessory ports to the left of those, and the accessory ports allow for the connection of the wall panels, the paging stations, and for the remote audio inputs that I mentioned earlier. So for each of the accessory ports, you can have 1 audio input coming in on those accessory ports that is then an additional input to the 6. So for example, you have the 6 audio inputs, plus you have 1 audio input from a Bluetooth wall panel that sits in the zone, and you effectively have 7 audio inputs that you can listen to in that one zone. One key thing we want to highlight is that the local input is locked to that zone. So if you have a Bluetooth wall panel that's in zone 1 and connected to this port, you can only listen to it on zone 1. The 6 audio inputs here are shared on all output zones, but the local input here is only locked to that zone. So that's the main audio setup of the system. In addition to that, we've got some general purpose inputs and outputs. On the ZONEMIX 4, it has 4 in and 4 out. And on the 8, it has 8 in and 8 out. These are configured in software to do a multitude of different things that can be configured within the software. But generally speaking, they are used for things like in the scheduler to trigger outputs that you can say at midday trigger one of the general purpose outputs, and that can be configured to any third-party product that needs that trigger. We can also use the inputs to trigger internal message playback. For example, you could have a button on a wall that's connected to one of the inputs, and that automatically plays a pre-recorded message from the SD card. All of that is configured within the software. We then have an inbuilt tone generator in the product, and that has a dedicated evacuator, intruder, bell, and chime tone. Again, you close those contacts and it will play those tones out of the system. And finally, we have RS-232 and Ethernet control on the back of the product. So in total, you've got USB-C on the front, Ethernet on the back, and RS-232 is a complete control solution for the ZONEMIX. Jumping into the control panel, so when obviously you don't want to only use the front panel of the product, when we're sitting in each zone, you want to have control over the audio. Then we have the 3 options that I mentioned earlier. So from the left side, the WP4R gives you 4 buttons and the volume control. Each of those 4 buttons can be configured, and we'll show you that in the next slide, what you can do with those buttons. The WP10 just basically gives you more buttons to do more in the zone, and then WP-Vol for dedicated volume control. Shown in the top right there is the option of customizing the colors of the wall panels. They come in black or white as standard, but you can also buy these HPM Vivo cover plates, and these allow you to completely customize the look to have a red on black, red on white, blue, etc., depending on if you want a color-coded solution. Excuse me. So with the control panels, this is all of the features that can be assigned to each of the buttons within the control software. And I won't go into all of the features in this presentation. That will be in the second webinar when we go into a deep dive on the software. But as you can see, there is a whole multitude of different things that can be assigned to each of the buttons, but predominantly the core ones are things like source selection, volume control, mute control, and then the more advanced features are things like running tasks or executing scheduler functions. So all of those can be assigned to buttons, and they could be put into reception areas, for example, that they have more master control in the system rather than individual zone control. I didn't say earlier, but the control panels, you can have up to 16 wall panels in the system. So it gives you an awful lot of capability to add lots of control panels. Moving on to the paging station, the system supports 16 paging stations, and each of the paging stations has 13 programmable buttons on it. Again, through the PC control software, those buttons are assigned via the software, and they can be assigned to individually select a zone or create groups of zones or to do pre-recorded message playback. Excuse me, so a typical use case would be maybe the left side buttons allow you to individually select all of the 8 zones. And then the right side buttons, you would maybe want to create groups of zones that you wanted to select group 1, 2, and 8, for example, that you could do that all through one button press as a group. Or you could assign messages to one of the buttons and play a pre-recorded message from the SD card to assigned zones that you want from the paging station. And finally, we have the audio wall panels, as mentioned before. These allow you to have these inside the zone along with the wall panels so that you can have audio from the zone being fed back into the ZONEMIX system, mixed together and then played out of the zone.
BBT.
Yep, sorry, can you
with the WPBT wall panel, the Bluetooth wall panel, no, that is a Bluetooth 5.1, so you'll get up to 200 meters line of sight range from it, and it is fully programmable, where you can set the Bluetooth name and the PIN number and the security settings. In other words, when you finish with it, does it remember the login or does it forget it? So it's quite a flexible addition to the ZONEMIX.
Thank you. And all of that is integrated within the software that you can set all of these. Once you've paired the audio wall panel to the ZONEMIX, you can then, from the software, enter in all of these settings to individually program the audio panel. And again, you can imagine if you've got two of these wall panels sitting in two rooms side by side, it's highly likely that you'll be able to see both of them from your phone or tablet, for example. So that's giving you the ability to name them so that you don't connect to the wrong Bluetooth wall panel. And again, in the second webinar, we will go through this in more detail, but this is showing an example of how you can connect the system together. So the port connections that were on the back of the product, if I just very quickly skip back to the start here, that what we're talking about is the accessory ports sitting on the left-hand side here. So the accessory ports, you can connect up to 8 controllers per port and 1 audio input per port, as we're showing in these top 2 slides here. So what it means is that you can have 8 controllers on 1 port, but they can be controlling any zone within the system. So the controllers are not locked to the accessory port for that zone. So you could have a wall panel that is controlling zone 1, a separate one controlling zone 2, but they could be connected to the same port. All of that is just done within the software, how you want each of the wall panel controls to which zone it wants to control. But with the audio input, as we mentioned previously, that is locked to the zone and it only has 1 audio input. So why you're seeing highlighted here that you cannot connect multiple audio wall panels to a port, it's because it only has 1 audio input. So in effect, you would be trying to mix them together, but it does not support that feature. In addition to that, you can also do the same with the paging stations, that you can have multiple paging stations connected to a port, but they don't necessarily need to be assigned to a single zone. They're just programmed within the software to be paging to wherever you need them to be. So as a final example, this is quite complex and there is a whole series of documentation on how to wire the system and how all of this goes together. And this is a simplified view for this webinar. But as an example at the end here, that you could have into the zone 1 accessory port, you could connect 2 wall panel controls. So for example, if you have a larger room, you have a controller at one end of the room and you have another controller at the other end of the room. You have 2 pagers in there and you have 1 Bluetooth wall panel. You can then replicate those on all of the other accessory ports into the product. So for the ZONEMIX 4, there are 4 inputs, and for the 8, there are 8. And finally, these are separate products, but they can be integrated into the ZONEMIX solution. And so these are standard XLR and twist lock audio input wall panels, and also VCA controls. So what you could do is you could connect one of these, and these wall panels are not active. They're just taking the audio input and have a balanced audio output on the back. Those can connect directly into the accessory port. So it's just a balanced audio input that comes into those ports. and can be fed back into the ZONEMIX system. So as another addition to the WPBT, the Bluetooth wall panel, you could instead just have a balanced audio input in the zone. And these volume controls here, which are standard transformer attenuators, they could create sub-zones for you if you wished, to create more than the 8 zones in terms of volume control, that you could have a sub-zone. Moving on to the software, this is a PC application. There is not a Mac application for this. It's a PC only application at the moment. But this is how you would configure the system. As you're seeing here, predominantly we're looking at the audio level and mix of the system. So along here, you have each of the zones. You would select which zone you want to control, and then you'd be changing the audio mix in it. So along here, you have the 6 shared audio inputs on the rear of the ZONEMIX, and you have the local input, which is from the accessory port. So I'm just going to repeat this again, just in a different way, so hopefully it's understandable. You have the 6 inputs and you have the local input. So what that means is you have on the rear of the product, sorry, my cursor, you have the 6 audio shared inputs, and then you have the local input on the accessory port. So that would be your Bluetooth wall panel, for example. So that's where in the software, you're seeing the 7 audio inputs, the 6 here, plus your 7th on the accessory port. I then come back to the software. So that is the audio mix that you're doing for that zone. There are additional settings in there that you can limit volume settings, change filters, tones, compressors, limiters, etc. All of this we will go into in more detail in the second webinar. I'm just giving a very top-level summary of what you can do. In addition to the main audio mix, you then have a full priority scheme within the product that allows you to decide if priorities are on input 1, for example, if that's connected to a microphone. Does it want to mute all of the other sources in that zone? Does it want to be a global mute? There's a very complex priority scheme that exists in the control software. Sorry?
And a takeaway from that priority system, we're going to a lot of trouble to make sure that a priority can be set up on a per zone basis. So it's not just global. They can have different priorities for different zones, which greatly adds to the flexibility of the system.
Yeah, thank you. So it goes all the way from there is an emergency input that will lock the whole system. You can then attach it to fire panels, for example, and you can say, is it going to mute the audio output? Is it going to have a dedicated single output that goes to everything, all the way down to what Peter just said in terms of on a per zone basis of priority. So very comprehensive in terms of what that priority can do. There is also the scheduler here, and we'll go into that in a later slide. The date and time, there is an internal real-time clock within the product, which is specifically used for the scheduler. But it also supports a network time, that when you're connecting into a network, it will take the network time and be very accurate. So if you're using the real-time clock inside the product, it's about 30-second accuracy a year. But if you're then connecting to the network, which is what we would advise you to do to get ultimate accuracy on the time that's within the product. So there is support in the date and time in order to do that, along with daylight savings, depending on the territory that you're in. Paging and remote features here, that is where it allows you to configure what are the buttons doing for the wall panels and how those function. And then we have I/O, which, as I mentioned at the start, we have 4 or 8 GPIO, and you can then configure those, and we'll again show you that in a future slide. So the software is relatively simple in terms of the setup of it, but provides an awful lot of features in there. So now specifically talking about the task management, this is where the scheduler at its core first starts, that you create tasks, and then once you've created those tasks, you can assign them to the scheduler or to the wall panels or to the general purpose inputs. So it's giving you the flexibility of, is it an automated trigger that you want for that task using the scheduler? Or is it someone walking up to a wall panel and pressing a button? Or is it a big red button on a wall or a third-party control device that is then triggering the general purpose input? So you've got those three mechanisms that you can trigger the tasks to give you ultimate flexibility in how you want the task to run. So as we're showing in this slide here, that we have various tasks coming down, and you would just be creating a new task. And then within the action here, it then allows you to do things like adjusting volume, playback of messages, triggering of presets. And you can then combine all of these together if you wish. You don't have to, but once you've created the tasks, you can also then group them together. And when you group them together, for example, if you wanted to play an audio file, trigger a preset, and then play another audio file, you could then do all of that by creating the three tasks. You would then go into the task group them together, and then you could assign that one group task to the scheduler, to a wall panel button, or to a general purpose input. And then you start to build up very complex task groups that can do some very advanced scheduling of tasks. And again, all triggered through scheduler for automation or through the wall panel and GPIs. Again, there's an awful lot to that, and we'll go into that in the next webinar. So this is just giving a brief overview of how that would work. In the middle, you're setting up all of the tasks. Then within the general purpose inputs, you could then assign one of those tasks using a drop-down menu to select that task. You could do it from a red button rather than our wall panels, or you could use our wall panels as well. So all of those sources to trigger the task, and then the scheduler as well. And then another core feature of this product is that it has a full inbuilt scheduler in the product. So this really expands the capabilities of the product in terms of school applications or anywhere where you need to do some form of automation. So all of the tasks that I previously mentioned, if you're changing volume controls, if you're generating presets, all of these types of things, that you can then come in here into the task. You can then come and create a task schedule, and then those will be inserted into this calendar. And frankly, there's so much to this. Again, sorry, I keep saying for the next webinar, but there is a whole multitude of options that you can put in here to trigger the task once. Is it recurring scheduling? And also we have a dedicated day scheduler that allows you to do for school applications. You can create whole views that at 9 AM you're ringing a bell, at 10 AM you're ringing a bell, etc., and building up the full schedule for the day. And then you can apply entire schedules to create entire term blocks for schools. And we also have some advanced features in there in terms of if you have in-service days or days that you don't want the schedule to action, you can replace them or you can turn the scheduler off. And all of these more advanced features are available in the scheduler. I'm now going to pass you over to Peter, who's going to walk through some of the application examples just to give more detail on that side.
Thanks, Ewan. Okay, this is just a couple of applications that serves to highlight exactly what you can do with the ZONEMIX in a real life situation. What we've got here could be a basic 4-zone function center. There are speakers in each of the rooms powered by, in this example, the HS 4250P 4x250 watt power amp. And we've got, as you can see, wall panels and paging mics spread throughout the installation. Now, what all the coloured lines for the buses, it highlights one of the key points of the ZONEMIX, pardon me, that adds to the flexibility of installation. You will notice there, as an example, on that line there, on the one bus line, we've got a control panel in zone 1, and we've got a paging mic in zone 3, and the control panels and an audio input in zone 3 as well, all running off the one bus. And zone 1, the control panels here are wired up another bus that also loops into the main paging mic as at reception. Now, because with the wall panels, when you program them up, and as Ewan has said a number of times, we'll cover this more in the next webinar, you tell the button on the wall panel you are doing this to this input in this zone. It is fairly agnostic when it comes to what accessory port is connected to. So you connect it to the most convenient accessory port for your cabling, and tell it exactly what it's going to do. The only restriction is, of course, the audio input panel, which that's in accessory port 1 because it is for zone 1. And this highlights the flexibility of that. And you'll also see over here in zone 4, there's a dedicated local input, the WPML, which gives you balanced mic line inputs. That could be used if it's a large outdoor area, if somebody's coming in with an external sound system, a DJ, etc. They want to plug into the main system, they can then do it from there. Oops. Expanding it a bit more for a much larger area. Now, this could be an office, a large function centre, or anything. And we've got a ZONEMIX 8 up here. And we've got 6 rooms, each with its own dedicated power amplifier and speakers, a dedicated paging station, and a dedicated Bluetooth input for each of the 6 rooms. So a user can go into that room and use some of the inputs from the main source inputs, or if they wish, via the Bluetooth panel, have a local audio input that is only going to that room, and if necessary, pays throughout the installation. Global whole of area speakers are there, and they are then run from reception off a separate power amplifier, and that in this instance is will be the 7th zone, and you can then route any of the inputs and control that from up here, or have a separate audio playing straight to that zone there. Another real-life situation is a school situation, and this would be a basic small to medium-sized school where you might have. Apologies for that. This could be another standard school, 3 school buildings and a combined gymnasium area. Amplifiers, 1 amplifier feeding the speakers in each of the zones, and a wall panel in each room doing it. And over here we've got a scheduler riding over the top, sending functions, controlling what presets and messages are played throughout the installation. So there are just 3 basic examples to show the flexibility and the type of applications the ZONEMIX goes into. If there's any questions on this stuff, I just drop them into the chat and we'll cover them as we go. Now, adding on to it, naturally the perfect partners for the ZONEMIX are the Australian monitor amplifiers. And we've got 2 multi-channel series of amplifiers that you may be aware of, the HSP series and the ISP series. The HSP series on the left is they come in, there's 2 and 4 channel options there, 2x120 and 250, and 4x120 and 250. Each output channel can be 4 ohm or 100 volt line. They're a Class D amplifier, and they are also programmable via a separate PC application. The PC application on this gives you mini DSP capability that allows you to adjust volume, do your matrixing, what input goes to what outputs, high and low pass filtering, and compression limiter, pink noise generation for commissioning and muting, and inversion of the channels on these. Out of the box, they're a straight dumb power amplifier. Input 1 goes to output 1, input 2 to output 2, etc. The software is optional. If you don't want to start fiddling around with it, you don't need it. Don't need to do it. Just use it as a power amplifier. But if you wish to, you can get in there and get creative. An example is a simple installation where you've got multiple 100 volt line speakers on 3 of the outputs, but you've got a subwoofer that's got to run low impedance on one of the on the 4th output. You can set that. So you can set it up with the software so it's low impedance on that output, and apply a high pass filter to it for the subwoofer. The ISP series takes that to the next level. Pardon me. Then again, 4 amps in the range. 2x120 and 250 and 4x120 and 250. Then again, high or low impedance on each output. Now, these are full networkable Ethernet controllable amplifiers. The software is our Alma control software that is built into them. So just log into the amplifiers. And when you do that, you have full input matrix metering, full input and matrix adjustments, your filters, and a 12-band parametric per output on them as well. And it's also got configurable GPIOs and VCA control in it as well. Now, if you want to expand them, on the back panel, you can put in a Dante card that'll give you a 4x4 Dante input to these amplifiers. Or if you don't want to do Dante, you can put an analog card in that'll give you an additional 4 analog line inputs. And when you do that, they are also routable using the software. The advantages of that there, if you don't need a Dante amp, you don't have to buy one. You can buy the amplifier, and it's the card's easy. It's user installable on the back panel to add Dante to them at a later date if you wish.
Thank you, Peter. So, as I've been mentioning through this presentation, the next webinar we'll go into a deep dive on the software, because this webinar would be far too long if we did it in this one. So we'll be going through all of the features of the ZONEMIX software, how you would set up the audio in terms of the matrixing and the mixing, the capabilities of restricting volume levels for end users so that they're not breaking your setup, how all of the priority scheme can be set up, how that interoperates with the rest of the system, and then a deep dive into the scheduler, how you would set up the task management, all of the capabilities that exists in there. The day schedule, as I mentioned before, in terms of school applications, we'll go into an example of how that should be set up, and then how we can activate those through general purpose inputs and through the wall panels. So all of that, in addition to the setting up of pagers, the remote wall panels, and various additional features such as front panel, you can enable and disable various features on there, again, to prevent the end user from potentially breaking the setup during commissioning. So there's a whole bunch of additional features in the software that allow that to be activated. And just at the end of this webinar, we just wanted to also highlight some of the new products that we have very recently released. As you were mentioning before, the Bluetooth wall panel, which is a WPBT. This is a standalone box version of that product. So if you don't want to punch a hole in the wall in order to get the Bluetooth capability, the True Blue is a standalone Bluetooth audio receiver for that purpose. So it has a very similar feature set to the wall panel version. It has the front panel controls, as shown here. Sorry, get my cursor. The media controls on the front of the product, and that is media controls that get reflected back into your phone or tablet, for example. So that is actually sending commands to the connected device, whether it's turning its volume up or playing and pausing. That's not internal features of the True Blue. That's controlling the connected product. You have the ability to change the input, because there is an auxiliary input there. So are you using Bluetooth or are you using the auxiliary input? You can select which input that you're controlling. And then on the back of the product, one of the differences between the True Blue and the wall panel is you have full balanced audio outputs on the True Blue. You have the USB connection on there, which connects to the control software in order to program it. And then finally, an additional thing that the wall panel does not have is the ability to control it via RS-232. So there's a command set that goes with this in order to change the PIN number and change the security features, the name, PIN number, and the security features within the product. And a use case for that would be in something like a unified communications setup. So if you have a meeting room and it changes the Wi-Fi password, changes all of these features, you'd additionally customize the Bluetooth that during that meeting the name is this, the PIN number is this, and all of that could be programmed into this audio receiver via a third-party control system, sending that information in using the RS-232. So that's the True Blue, and that is released now. It is going to be in stock in
first week or so in March. We'll have stock of that.
First week, so in 1 or 2 weeks we'll have stock. I just have one question actually that's come in on the SD card. So is there any limitations to the announcements stored on the SD card? So the number of announcements and the size. So no is the quick answer. It supports WAV files on the SD card, but you could put in as big a card as you wished. So whatever it is, a 2 terabyte size drive. One limitation that does exist is it's a FAT file system. So the maximum size of each individual file is 2 gigabytes. So that would be a limitation in terms of the length of the track, but again, we can't envisage that really being an issue. So it truly, the size of the SD card, you can put as many files on there as you wish, and then you're limited to that 2 gig per file.
And one feature that I didn't think to mention earlier, mentioned with the SD card, to load tones onto the SD card, the quickest way to do it is to put the SD card in your laptop and just drop them over that way. But if you wish, you can also upload audio files using the software to the card via the network connection. So if you've got this in a situation where you're changing in-store messages every day or second day, you don't have to get the people to run down to the rack room to do it. They can just upload the files, the new audio files to the SD card over the network.
And you also have the additional capability within the product, as I mentioned before, that you can create task groups, that if you have lots of files that you maybe want to play one after the other, rather than you having to create that in a separate application and merge them all together, you could create a task group that plays the first file, then plays the second, then plays the third. So the ZONEMIX has that capability of being able to nest the files. And also it has the ability to do repeating patterns on those messages. So you can repeat the first one 3 times, repeat the second one, whatever number of times, etc., that you have that capability of individually saying what you want to do. You can also restrict the length of how long you play each file. So you could play the first 10 seconds of a file, for example. So you really have a lot of features in there that we'll show in the next webinar, specifically around message playback. And Mike, thank you for that question. And this is also just to highlight with the WPBT, and we've been talking about that is integrating into the ZONEMIX system. But if you want to run that wall panel completely separate of the ZONEMIX system, so you just don't need a ZONEMIX, it's capable of operating independently as a standalone product. You can then program using the USB-C, which is that connector sitting there. So you would use the PC control software, plug in using the USB-C and program the PIN number, the name, etc. And then that could connect optionally again to a WP breakout. So if you're using the standalone, you would connect any power supply you want that's I think 15 to 24 volts from memory into the product, and it sends out standard balanced audio out. Within the software, you can change that to mono if you wish, but the point is it's just standard balanced audio that comes out of it. So you can connect that into any system that you wish. There is this optional extra box, which is the WP breakout, that has its own power pack and then allows it to send power to a wall panel. Balanced audio comes back from the wall panel and it's then broken out to unbalanced, and it supports 2 wall panels. So this is an optional extra box that allows you to easily power the unit and to break the audio out for connection into any other audio system. So that's just highlighting all of the Bluetooth wall panel can be entirely integrated into a ZONEMIX, and you just directly connect it to it. But this is an example of when it is used as a standalone system.
And also with that breakout box, that allow you to easily have a routable Bluetooth wall panel, which does come up, where they want a Bluetooth panel in an installation that they can then choose which zone they want to route it to. By using the breakout box, you just route that to one of the line level inputs on the ZONEMIX, and it's just another line level input at that point.
Yeah, and just to quickly highlight that again, if I come to the back panel, that you would use the breakout box, the Bluetooth wall panel, the breakout box, and then you could connect to any one of these RCA inputs, and that then creates a global audio input that could be routed to any zone, as Peter says. So that's just how you would connect it, one of these 6 audio inputs to get, rather than it locked to the zone, to get it as a global source for any zone. Okay. So if there aren't any other questions, I'd like to thank you very much for your time, and hope to see you in the next webinar where we go through the software in greater detail.